The trial, when predictive analytics in social care goes horribly wrong. It's a tragedy, and local authority officials find themselves in the dock. Hello, I'm Paul Waller.
And I'm Maddie Waller.
We're from Thorney Isle Research, a research and advisory organisation that specialises in the impact of technology on the public sector and the regulation of technology. Our aim is to challenge received wisdom, hype and marketing BS about tech in government. So if you think that something looks, sounds or smells a bit odd, then check out what we have to say about it.
We're going to tell you a story, a crime story set in a courtroom. Some local authority officers are on trial for manslaughter after a child they were meant to be protecting died violently, a bit like the well-known Baby P case. The court proceedings that follow are entirely fictional, and we do not suggest or imply in them that any real person has done anything wrong.
However, the background and context is entirely real, and many of the events mentioned possibly, indeed probably, did actually happen somewhere, sometime. We've simply put them together to illustrate the potential consequences.
Between 2017 and 2019, several local authorities in England piloted the use of predictive analytics in social care for adults and children. Many of the pilots were stopped before being put into live operation, with much surrounding controversy and critical analysis. It is not clear whether any such uses continued into the period of the pandemic starting in 2020. Academics have studied some and found numerous issues and a lack of detailed information and results. Others, including ourselves, have flagged up many risks.
One of the issues raised was how social workers would deal with the output of a predictive system conflicting with their professional judgment. The likelihood is that institutional pressure and aversion to personal risk by frontline workers would, over time, lead to the system prediction being acted on without any further consideration. The understanding around false positive and false negative results could also be an issue due to the need to interpret conditional probabilities. This problem would almost inevitably lead to both unnecessary interventions, disrupting the lives of families and wasting resources, and missing intervening in critical cases, where harm later happens.
The latter situation could be regarded as negligence, and should someone die as a result, might be considered gross negligence manslaughter. It is a real thing, by the way. Officials involved may then find themselves in court on such a charge.
As we said, the story that follows is fictional. There's no suggestion that such an event happened, or that any local authority officials behaved in such a manner. However, had these predictive analytic systems been adopted on a widespread basis, it is quite possible that such a scenario would have played out. So this story is written to emphasise the dangers of such systems in social care, and by extension, in any situation of decision making in public services. Here we go.
The Director of Children's Services and the Chief Digital Data and Technology Officer, or CTO for short, of a local authority are on trial for gross negligence manslaughter following the death in 2018 of child D as a result of child abuse in a family on the radar of the authority's social care team. The court case was begun by the prosecution but then suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
In 2017, the authority had purchased and put into operation an algorithm-based system using predictive analytics to identify families where there was a risk of serious problems occurring that put children at risk.
Two social workers had given evidence. They said that the system had been forced on them with little consultation, being driven by the CTO with political support, as being a way to use resources better, save money, and better target interventions through digital transformation. They said that progressively their performance assessment was linked to how they dealt with the cases flagged as high risk by the system. They said that their professional judgment was viewed as inferior to the predictions of the technology. The system had not flagged child D's family to the social care team, and despite doubts, the team had not taken any action in relation to that family.
The Director of Children's Services, in her defence, said that she had little influence over the decision to implement the system, although she had misgivings. However, given the decision, she convinced herself that the endorsement by the Troubled Families Programme and the strong claims for the system by consultants and the CTO had meant she should give it a chance. Once it was in place, it became apparent to her that politically and personally it would be disastrous if a prediction from such an expensive and high-profile system was ignored and something bad happened. So she put in place instructions for the social care team to focus on the cases flagged by it above all others.
Given limited resources, this meant all effort was expended on them alone. She had no means of telling how effective the system was, or how many incidents were prevented, or even how much money was saved. Politically, the alleged benefits could not be questioned. Her belief was that it was likely that without the system, her team would have intervened with Child D's family and thus probably, but of course she could not be totally certain, the death would have been prevented. She admitted to no knowledge whatsoever about how predictive analytics worked or how to interpret their output.
The CTO was next called to the stand. We will read the court transcript of the cross-examination. Maddie will read the questions from the prosecuting counsel, and I will read the defendant's, that is the CTO's, answers.
Why was this predictive analytics system introduced? What prompted its adoption?
We brought it in because of the government's Troubled Families Programme recommendation and funding from it. And there's widespread messaging about the ability of such systems, and of course there's a need to make savings, pressures to do less with family social care, and it ticked the digital transformation box.
And how did you select the system?
We saw what other authorities were doing, listened to consultants and vendors, and looked at published material in local government and elsewhere. Then we conducted a procurement process, lightweight, as this was a fixed-time trial.
Who made the decision, and on what basis? What was your role as CTO, and what was your influence?
The senior management team made a decision endorsed by council. My job was to recommend the system, make the business case, conduct the procurement, and oversee implementation by consultants.
What was the justification for bringing in the system?
Well, the Troubled Families Programme pretty much telling us to do it, backed up by NHSX, a lot of evidence around how effective these systems were in targeting social care interventions and saving money, and council members wanting to be seen to be doing their bit on digital transformation. I was under pressure to achieve digital transformation. It was an objective in my performance appraisal, and it's sort of my job to find technology and data solutions and bring them in to transform operational departments like social care.
What evidence did you have that it would work?
Well, there's lots of material out there about the benefits, including from central government and the health service, and lots of others doing similar things. Case studies by the consultants, details from the vendors, all saying the same.
It is known that such systems are very dependent on the quality of data on which they are trained. Did you seek professional advice from data analytics experts on the quality and usefulness of the data, and the risk from potential bias and correlations within the data?
It's not my field of expertise, and we don't have anyone in the authority qualified. The consultants gave us assurances that the system had been widely used and trained and used on data similar to ours.
What impact assessments were carried out?
Obviously privacy, so we put it to our GDPR team and its lawyers.
And what was their advice?
GDPR issues had to be addressed. We got internal legal advice and we trusted that.
What consultation took place with the families that would be covered by the system?
None. We were advised that if they knew, they might start gaming the system or try to opt out, which would defeat the point of it.
Was that your advice to the senior management team?
It came up, but I said that was what we'd been advised.
And what was the community told?
A privacy statement was put on the website to explain the GDPR basis for the data processing.
But no impact assessments beyond that? For example, ethical?
No, part of the point of having a trial was to find out about impacts.
Okay, if it's a trial, how would you tell if the system was working well and spot any positive or negative impacts?
We would get feedback from the social care team and the effects on its bottom line and on effects in the community.
Was there an evaluation set up alongside the trial?
No, we had no baseline against which to conduct a comparison.
Okay, so how were the social care team involved in selecting and implementing the system?
They were invited to presentations by the consultants and given training in what the outputs were and how to read them.
So, is it fair to say in summary that this was a technology-led experiment rather than a problem-led solution driven by social care needs?
I suppose in hindsight, yes, but we were incentivised financially by Troubled Families Programme and also encouraged by NHS programmes.
Were you aware of how the system was changing practices in the social care team, the way they made their decisions and how it interacted with their performance management assessments? If so, what did you do with that knowledge?
Informally, I gathered the effect was to focus their efforts on the cases flagged by the system, which I suppose was the point of the exercise, better targeting. So I didn't see any reason to interfere.
What reasoning was available to the social care team from the system about how it reached its conclusions? Were its workings transparent?
The output gave a profile of each family and a short reason why the case was flagged, but not detail on the analytic process. The vendors insisted that all that was commercially confidential. I'm not sure we'd have understood it anyway.
Witness Social Worker 1 said that the social workers were encouraged to put more trust in the system's predictions than in their own judgment. Is that right? Where did that encouragement come from, and what were the effects of that?
Well, I guess that's the point of these systems, to improve on human judgment. I don't know that their judgment was dismissed entirely, but I suppose if all their time is taken up by the flag cases, then they don't have much room for manoeuvre.
Social Worker 1 said that performance was being judged on how many of the high-risk cases put out by the system each month were followed up. Were you aware of how many of those seemed, when investigated by the social care team, to not be particularly problematic? But given the flag by the system, they had to continue to put resources into them. How did the number compare to the system's expected rate for false positives? Do you agree that false positives in this context lead to wasted resources?
I don't know the numbers, but I did hear them grumbling about wasting time visiting families that seemed fine. But then the point of the system is to spot things they wouldn't, so their interventions might have been useful anyway. I don't know the numbers exactly, no.
Do you not agree that false positives can subject a family to unjustified intrusive visits and investigations and stigmatisation?
I suppose so, yes, but the system is supposed to be accurate in spotting cases for intervention, so who is to know what is a false positive?
What were the rates of true positives, false positives, true negatives and false negatives for the system? You clearly don't know, but isn't that crucial to understanding how the system is performing?
I'm afraid I'm out of my comfort zone on that. Is that really an issue if the system is accurate?
You don't seem to get the point that there are many ways to consider accuracy for statistical-based systems like this. Social Worker 2 said that the social care team was instinctively concerned about Child D's family, but the system never identified it as high risk. Is this not the case of a false negative? Is the fact that we are here in a court a demonstration of the importance of knowing the characteristic of one system? The system you advocated with a total lack of knowledge, even of the issue, never mind the figures.
I guess so, but these things are advocated by lots of people who, I presume, know more than me.
Do you agree that the lack of explanation from the system about how it reached its conclusions made it much harder for the social care team to apply their professional judgment with confidence rather than having to accept the outputs blind?
I suppose that's possible. I don't know if they ever said that.
So did any authority officer or politician actually understand how these systems work and the risks that they pose, such as from false positives and false negatives, as we have discussed?
No, not really.
Right, you have said that this was a trial of a system to see if it worked, although we have established that evidence of its effectiveness was limited beforehand to little more than sales pitches, and no evaluation was in place for this particular trial that you set up. I say you because all of the evidence heard by this court points to your being decisive in the decision to introduce it. You have confirmed that families in the area that were subject to the system's analysis were not informed of the process. We can discount, I think, a page in legal language hidden on the authority's website. Would you therefore agree that those subject to its prediction algorithm had no knowledge of, no understanding of, and gave no consent to its use?
Yes, I have to accept that. given the decisions made.
You are presumably aware of the ethics around drug trials, yes? So, imagine that a drug company wants to trial a new drug. It constructs a test to compare it against a placebo and selects people to be the guinea pigs. It finds a way to administer the drug and placebo in a double-blind trial. In fact, it's a triple-blind trial, as it does not even reveal to the participants that they are part of the drug trial. One of them dies as a result of the drug. Do you think that the drug company and the researchers who decided on that course of action were ethical? Were they liable for that death? Were they culpable?
It would seem wrong to do that in that situation.
To sum up, I submit to the court that the imposition of a predictive analytics system of this nature, with no understanding of its effectiveness, working, or impacts, allied with procedural changes based on the wrong assumption of 100% accuracy, prevented the social care team from exercising its professional judgment and intervening with Child D's family, thus tragically leading to the death of Child D. We can understand how incentives from outside, widespread hype, overstated claims by vendors and consultants, and of course financial pressures, led to the authority considering the use of predictive analytics. However, we have seen how a chain of events, actively led and strongly advocated by the Chief Digital Data and Technology Officer due to his job function and performance objectives, displayed a catastrophic level of ignorance, venality, and obsessive technological solutionism that fell far below any interpretation of the terms professional or ethical. I submit that this level of negligence, that contributed with significant probability to the death of Child D, is sufficient to be gross, and thus criminal, and a conviction for gross, negligent manslaughter is fully justified. Your Honour, that is all from the prosecution.
Okay, well, that was the case from the prosecution. The judge adjourned the trial at this point, and lockdown prevented its resumption. So, it's left to you now. You decide. Guilty or not guilty?
The issues raised in this story are taken from our paper, Why Predictive Algorithms Are So Risky for Public Sector Bodies, that also contains a wide range of sources and references. Those include studies of the use of predictive analytics in welfare services such as depicted in this story, which is openly available at the link on the slide. Thank you for listening, and we hope not to see you in court.